Hey everybody, this is Dan,
And this is Ron,
and this is a nominee questionable movies episode
61.
61. Okay.
And today we have a very special guest, a returning guest. Would you like to identify yourself, special guest?
Hello, this is Matt Cornell, zooming to you from Amsterdam.
Zoom.
Zoom zoom.
We're all Zoomers now.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you might not remember, but might know of it. Or Matt, do you remember the TV show Zoom?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, I used to watch that as a
Sounds
kid.
like somewhat familiar, but I couldn't tell you what it was.
Isn't all TV Zoom now?
Yes, that's true. All TV and all conversations.
Yeah,
Zoom is the real world.
yeah. No, I remember the Aretha Franklin song, Who's Zooming Who?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And we're zooming Matt Cornell.
Woohoo!
Welcome to the program.
So for this episode, we watched.
Just that musical cue to drop.
Was that?
Gonna drop that musical cue in there.
No, I don't want to get. I don't want to get zinged, or I don't want to get zoomed. I don't want to get dinged for copyright violations.
Yeah.
That happened when I included that little bit of what's her name, the Julie Brown song.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm a blonde. So.
Yeah. I mean, the copyright police, that's like one more set of police that are out of control.
That's also the reason that we our cinema chose when we went online not to use YouTube for streaming, because even you could have like a public domain movie, but if it had a copyrighted musical sequence in it, then all of a sudden like the stream would cut out because they have these filters that just automatically block a stream. Yeah. So things like Twitch and Discord don't have this kind of software, but Facebook and YouTube, very aggressive filtering.
There was a bit too that in the same episode I had the theme song for Green Acres, but we got dinged not for the theme song itself by whoever owns the Green Acres music, but by a French cover band, which it was not the French cover band version, it was the original. And that one, I figured I'm not going to fight that one. I'll just cut it out.
No.
I guess at least YouTube is nice enough to have one of the options, instead of taking down the whole episode, is to just cut out that one bit. So I just said forget it, even though it wasn't the French version. It was unnecessary.
So there's a jump cut in that episode.
Yeah, honestly, I never went back to that one part. What was that?
I said it's very French.
I think the first 2 or 3 episodes, the ones that I edited, I like went kind of crazy on it, and I put too many filters on it, and it just sounds like you were hearing Space Ghost at the bottom of a pool. Like it's got that kind of like that like asteroid floating rumble under all of it.
But speaking of French cuts and French movies, the movie that we watched was PlayTime, Jacques Tati's PlayTime.
Excellent transition there.
Yeah, thank you.
A match cut, if you will.
I know I went back to a minute ago, but I was waiting for that transition. So, but it was actually we watched it because it was a choice by Matt. The Cinema of the Damned, of which he's founder and programmer, actually just had its last day, its last showing on the 3rd anniversary of its founding, just this past Thursday, which was sad. The show for that day were 2 movies that were shown the first time around. So, Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about that and why Playtime?
Well, yeah. Maybe first I should clarify that Playtime was one of 4 movies that we opened our cinema with. And even though last week was the 3-year anniversary / closing, continue to have an online platform. So in fact, it's going to continue as an online concern, at least as long as we feel like showing movies online. The idea behind it originally when we opened the cinema, well, first of all, a little bit of background. When Cinema of the Damned opened, we basically took over a dilapidated old cinema that had not really been used to show movies for a long time, and had been more like a party space. So it was just like it had 2 layers. Basically we went in. The first thing we would do is get out the carpet because it was covered in beer stained cigarettes filled stench. So we ripped up the carpet, and there was another carpet just like it underneath, because at some point the squatters in the building had decided, well, this carpet's disgusting, so let's just put a new one on top of it. So we did all this kind of stuff. We replaced the carpets, we painted, we brought in new projection, new sound, all this kind of stuff. And also, I don't know if you've ever tried to assemble or put together cinema seats, like vintage cinema chairs, but it's like the worst nightmare puzzle you can imagine because I guess at least at some point in history, these chairs all had slightly different sizes and belonged in particular parts of the row. And so it was just like this ongoing nightmare. And as we got closer and closer to opening day, we were learning that there were things that were just not going to be ready in time for opening. You know, and we were also encountering all these business problems, and we just came up with this idea of like movies that were about lost causes or in some way like improbable openings, right? Like where people were working against the odds to make something work with some kind of business. So the 4 movies we showed on opening night were Xanadu, which of course is a masterpiece from 1981.
And we covered that a few months ago.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So that one's about opening up an old theater and turning it into a roller disco, right? And then we showed My Beautiful Laundrette, which is the Stephen Frears movie about fixing up a laundromat. And then we showed a film called The Smallest Show on Earth, which is about fixing up a cinema. And then finally, Playtime, which for most of its running time, as you know, doesn't have anything to do with this subject. It's really about something else, if it's about anything at all.
Right.
But the centerpiece of the movie, of course, is this hour-long sequence of this restaurant. It looks like it's opening night, and they're still building it. You know, and so this really appealed to me on some basic level, like this idea that you're opening something and you're still learning how it functions while the public is coming in. And this is more or less what happened to us on opening night. You know, like we learned how to make popcorn for the first time, like 5 minutes before people walked in to buy popcorn, right? And classically, when we finally got to the end of these 4 movies, we show Playtime, and the DVD player was not cooperating. And so we got about 10 minutes into the movie, we realized the subtitles aren't on. And the last thing you want to do with a full house, with a movie, is like show them the DVD menu while you hunt around for subtitles. Right? It's just not very exciting. So we just let it play. And then I realized at some point, oh yeah, this movie doesn't need subtitles.
Right.
So it was the case of, much like in the movie itself, none of these problems really amounting to anything, because everyone gathering there was what made it special anyways.
Right.
I realized that's a much longer answer than you expected.
No. This is exactly the answer I wanted. And in fact, there's more to it.
You said the theme. I thought you were going to say that you screened Field of Dreams. And I was like waiting for it. Then you got the third one, and I was like, it's not a good movie. You probably were right to not show it, but
no, but it would definitely have fit the theme. Yeah. And so actually, when we ended up having to close last week after 3 years of doing this, it kind of fit the theme anyways, right? Because on the flip side of this, you know, this was a movie that Tati put 3 years of his life into, and it bankrupted him. You know, like he was only ever to make one more movie after this, and he, for a long time, lost his director credit, and, you know, and yet he made Playtime, right? Yeah. So he made like one of the greatest movies ever made. Yeah. You know, this was a period of reflection for us, right? Like, this is a movie about, in some ways, you know, struggling to make something against the odds, like both in the movie itself, and then like the story of its making also is about that. Right. And he was right. He was right. It was absolutely right of Tati to bankrupt himself to make this movie. It was an absolute gift to the world.
I've got to tell you, I'm still feeling it. So I watched it. You know, I was there for I was there for that last showing. I actually missed the beginning, but I came in. The moment I came in, I was hooked.
Yeah.
And then when it was over, I just had this I don't know, beatific smile on my face, or, you know, just a small smile, and it just stuck with me for I don't know how many hours. And then today, because I'd missed the beginning, I watched the beginning, and as soon as it happened, the smile came on. And now I just finished watching. I just watched the whole thing, but with a break. So I just finished it again, and I've still got that smile. It won't go away. It's
true. For those of you who can only listen at home, Ron's got a big smile right now. Do you want to like kind of explain what it's about since you just watched it? And did you watch it with subtitles?
I
did.
watched the subtitles. I tried turning them off, but actually they were when you showed it without subtitles,
Yeah.
right? When I watched it on here, I actually watched it on Amazon Prime has it, but you
Okay.
can't turn the subtitles off. They're part of the film itself.
Okay.
So it's not like CC closed
Yeah.
captioning or whatever.
Tati was reportedly against his films being shown with subtitles, but
And they were unnecessary. Actually, what I did at first for about 10 minutes, I put 2 books at the bottom to hide the subtitles. But eventually I took them away because they were covering about, I don't know, half a foot of the bottom of the TV. I'm missing some of the visuals. And I'd rather have the full visuals of the entire thing and the subtitles, which I can try to ignore. I can't ignore subtitles. I just, I look at them, I catch them immediately and then go back.
Yeah.
So I've always had that. But what is it about? Well, like you said, if it's about
a building
anything,
movie, right?
it's a what?
It's a building movie. It's like the Ladies Man or like Blade Runner or well, I guess Blade Runner is not like a building movie, but like a movie that's entirely about a like really constructed setting.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like more about the setting than any particular character or thing going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely about architecture on some basic level and how architecture organizes social life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we see Paris, but the only parts of Paris, like we see the Eiffel Tower, we see the obelisk, we don't see them directly. We see them either as reflections on big windows, lots of big windows, but we only see reflections. Or I think the Eiffel Tower might actually see, or the obelisk we see directly through the window, but it's still nobody ever turns to it. And it starts
like
off.
Everybody's like walking through this giant like colorless Mondrian painting. Just everything is these white and gray cubes.
Yeah.
And rectangles. It's sort of like the office scenes in The Apartment, the Billy Wilder movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a lot of harsh geometry.
Yeah, and he built all this, right? So this was called Tativille, this giant set that was constructed. And I guess one of the reasons this movie took 3 years to make is they had to build this thing. Wow. And then there were storms that came along and damaged it, so they had to rebuild and repair. And it just ended up costing a lot of money because of the scale of it, right? But yeah, it's not iconic Paris at all. Iconic Paris is always out in the distance somewhere, or it's on a poster.
Right.
Or it's in a reflected door, reflected in a glass door or something, but it's never there.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's like 4 story beats. I've seen it a few times, so I think like this is what I would argue are the story beats. One is that Tati's playing his iconic character, and he's trying to meet this guy in an office building. They have some kind of meeting, right? And for various reasons, mostly to do with the architecture and technology, they just never meet up. And then it's only much later in the film, about the midpoint, where they just run into each other on the street while they're watching these guys carry like a piece of glass through another window, right? So it's like, it's only by accident, right? So nothing about the organization of social life allows them to meet. Like, it's only by chance.
Right.
And then the second one is he keeps seeing, or he sees a couple of times, an old buddy, maybe like a war buddy or something, but he can never reach the guy. And I think he reaches him at some point much later in the film, in like the cafe at night. Is that right?
There's 3 war buddies. There's one that runs into him, and I'm sure you'll get to discussing this part too. There's one he runs into who brings him into his apartment, and I say bring because he invites him in, and he pretty much grabs him, takes it in there. That's one. There's the second one who's in a small truck across the street, and that's the one who never actually gets to meet. And the third one is the doorman at the restaurant,
right?
The restaurant scene, and he just keeps running into these war buddies.
Yeah.
Popular guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I've read about this is that he was tired of the character. I mean, for people who don't know, he was basically like the chaplain of France. He was active a whole generation past chaplain, right? He started this character in the mid 40s, but by 67, when this movie was released, he was done. Like, he was kind of done with this character. And so that's part of why he chose to decenter the character so much in the story, right? And at some point, we lose him entirely during that restaurant sequence. The other thread is quite clearly that he has this romantic interest in Barbara, this American tourist, and so we also tracked Barbara for a while.
Yeah, she keeps popping up because there's this group of tourists from the U.S. that every so often pops up, and they go through, and she's part of them. Most of them are probably in their 60s or so, and she's in her 20s.
Yeah.
So,
although the other women are much more age appropriate for Tati, let's be clear.
Yeah. I didn't pick up on that for a while, just because it was like, oh, okay, is he showing her how to get somewhere? It's like, oh no, wait, he's totally like into her because he gives her that gift at the end.
Yeah.
Is it a romantic interest? Because I saw it as more avuncular, and I realized part of it is because his most famous movie, or one of his most famous movies, is Mon Oncle.
Yeah.
A thin or non-existent line.
Yeah. What was that? Oh, okay, got
thin or non-existent line.
Yeah, romantic and avuncular. Okay.
It is the French we're talking about after all. I think. I don't know. I think a scarf is a romantic gift. I mean, but I think it's very gentle, right? The whole point is that narrative doesn't matter. So the point of having a sort of unresolved love story kind of underscores that this movie doesn't really care about narrative, right? So it has this love story that's almost like non-existent. So that's why I prefer to read it as one.
Away, then the bus can bring another one.
Right.
Lots of buses.
It won't be Barbara though.
It won't be Barbara.
And then the last plot, or the last kind of story there is clearly the opening of the restaurant,
right?
Which has a complete sort of cycle that it goes through, like literally from the first guests arriving to the whole place collapsing. And there you have a character who's pretty well defined, who's this like brash, kind of obnoxious American character who always, like, every time I see the film, he strikes me as an almost Trumpian figure, except that he's not like toxic in that sense. He's just a very kind of brash, like flashy, like, kind of what like a less toxic version of what people imagine Americans to be, right? This sort of like, he's just like showing off, right? And of course he becomes part of that whole anarchic energy of the end of the restaurant when the restaurant kind of collapses, right? So I think that, like, that's the part of the story that I really connected with, trying to open a business, as it were, and open up to the public. And it's the most famous part of the movie, but it's almost a self-contained movie within the movie itself.
It's the longest part.
Yeah, it's about an hour of screen time. So
right, yeah. It almost feels like, I mean, aesthetically, it's very much the same movie, but it feels like a separate part, kind of like that giant silent sequence in Rafifi. It's just like it's its own thing within the larger thing.
Yeah, I agree. Another way to look at it might be that that there's two sections of the movie, right? And in each section, we start out with something that's sort of organized in a certain way to create all sorts of problems and misconnections and disasters. And then at some point, this completely collapses and life springs forth, right? And that happens in the first half, basically when Tati like stops looking for the guy and just finds him on the street, right? So it's like this spontaneous gathering on the street that allows him to finally meet this guy. And then in the restaurant, it's like the restaurant is basically no fun until it falls apart.
Right.
And then like that's where like sociality like returns to the city. And I mean, I just love all that stuff at the end with people filling up to the bar and then traffic starting and There is the last scene is the traffic circle carousel. Yeah.
In which I love that. It was a wonderful ending. This movie is unspoilable. I mean, we always talk about the whole movie, including the ending, but this is unspoilable. It's just that last scene is.
Wasn't it traffic circle at the thing at the end? That was originally supposed to be the beginning of Weekend by Jean-Luc Godard.
Was it?
Maybe 30 seconds, and then the cars go around. No, that was a bad joke, though, right? Because there's 15-minute
Yeah.
tracking shot with the
Yeah,
cars.
yeah. Well, like I think, and that movie Weekend comes out like a year or two after this.
Oh,
But
okay.
you could definitely
Right.
match. You could definitely compare the two sequences. And I guess
Yeah, I feel like
Tati's.
I saw a lot of later movie, like in not movies I was expecting to draw connections to.
Mhm.
Like a lot of it felt kind of like Dast by Chantal Ackerman. Just sort of like these like very wide focus shots of
Yeah.
just like kind of. I mean, there's gags, which there aren't really gags in Dast, but you're just sort of watching people like they were in a fishbowl for a lot of it.
Which we get here too at one point. We've got the one friend who invites him into his apartment. It's a 2x2 grid. The apartments are giant windows. The bottom floor it's street level. Everybody can see into both of them.
All right, it looks like he's stripping for the lady who's watching her TV.
Yeah, because he takes off his suspenders, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all watching TV and they're opposite each other. So you've got the people in the apartment on the left facing the right wall, and the people on the right sitting and watching TV facing the left wall. And then upstairs, the same thing is going on, and it looks like they're staring right at each other. And meanwhile, we're outside looking in. We never actually go into the apartment. We're just all staring. And in fact, that's actually where you see, I can't remember the name of the guy that Hulo, that the Tati is trying to meet. He's actually in the apartment on the right, and he ends up going and taking the dog out for a walk. And that's how eventually about 10 minutes later they bump into each other.
Right. Those the other thing that about that scene, that like the fishbowl scene that you're talking about, is that, or it's like a TV, right? Like they're watching TV and we're sort of watching them in this square frame as well. Is how important sound is in that one, because you're like, the way the sound mix is, the sound of the city street is louder than what's going on inside those rooms. So again, it's a lot of kind of pantomime where dialogue isn't really the most important thing. You're like having to understand what's going on by watching gestures and movements. And meanwhile, your attention is drawn to like the street noise, which is really a weird choice, right?
Yeah.
There's so much about this movie that is just surprising.
The sound design was like bizarre.
Yeah.
What was bizarre?
The sound design, right? You got like 5 or 6 people talking over each other sometimes.
Yeah.
None of it is really put together for legibility, which is like really uncommon in a movie where you're literally building a skyscraper for it.
And
we should talk about that. Yeah.
I just want to say, being forced to watch the subtitles, because when I watched, like I said, when I watched it with you, there were no subtitles. Now watching the subtitles, so every so often there was a voice that was ever so slightly more audible, and I think I still would have caught what they were saying if not for the subtitles, and it was totally unnecessary.
Yeah,
you got everything by their motions, and you just see, you see what happens, and really it's all the noise.
It was interesting that Dan mentioned Skyscraper, because or movies that are sort of structured that way, because this is definitely a movie that uses a horizontal basis, right? So like the first thing about this movie that we haven't mentioned is that it's shot on 70 millimeter, right? And actually, well, I think it was 65, but would have been shown in 70. And for that reason, it's these are widescreen compositions, right? And the first thing about that is that your attention is all over the place, right? Whoever released the Where's Waldo books, they owe Tati's estate money, because this is the original Where's Waldo, right? Because there's so much going on in the frame. There's like different, there's foreground, there's middle ground, there's background, and then there's background. And then he's shooting through glass, so then you have reflections and this kind of thing. But the other part about that widescreen is he did that so that he could experiment with sound. So it's not going to be apparent to us watching this at home, but when this was released, it was, I think...
quadraphonic, right?
No, it was 5. It was either 5 or 6 panels. And that's why he chose the 65 millimeter film, was that you could fit multiple audio tracks on there. And so when you saw this properly exhibited, you could actually hear a completely different movie depending on which seat you have, because there's, as Dan was pointing out, there's like people talking all the time in this movie. And you can, when you have that level of detail in the audio, you can pick out what you want to listen to. Mm-hmm. And of course, now I think it all gets mixed down to 2-channel, which even I was watching it with headphones the other night when we screened it, and there's still quite a bit there to appreciate when you're listening on headphones. But it must have been astonishing to see this with all of those audio channels like separated like that, you know.
Well,
So
the Criterion disc has a 5.1 soundtrack.
okay, yeah.
I
So that would
think.
be
I
very
mean, I
close.
haven't had my 5.1 set up in like forever, but this would have been a good occasion for it.
Yeah.
You know, David Lean did the same thing with Lawrence of Arabia. It was shot on 65 millimeter, so that allowing for the sound. I mean, just another
Yeah.
it's interesting because you know the sound. Maurice Jarre's soundtrack is just you get a full orchestra there. So I
Yeah.
guess it's a similar effect.
Yeah, and for me, like it's very much. I mean, I don't think it's like it's not a secret or anything, but like the title of the movie, Playtime. On the one hand, it seems to be about like this idea of this kind of spontaneous sociality that exists, especially in urban spaces where like people can just where people come together for some reason, but also about the formal properties of the movie, because this is a movie where you get to play with the movie. Like it's a very interactive experience. Like, and I've seen it on 70 millimeter, I think 4 times now in a movie theater. Wow. And it is exactly like that. I have a different experience every time I watch it, because if I sit close, I have one experience. If I sit in the back right of the cinema, I have another experience, because it's a movie that really benefits from that widescreen presentation. So I don't say this very often about movies, and one of the reasons I'm so enthusiastic about it is that I think after the second time I saw Playtime, I just realized that it had taught me how to watch it. And you always hear people talking about that with movies, right? But it's like it teaches you how to watch it, and it also teaches you how to look at movies differently. You know, I mean, partially because Tati is so I mean, on the one hand, there's a lot of formal control, but on the other hand, there's an incredible amount of freedom.
Right.
So, like, he's very carefully setting up all of these different shots, but then he's breaking all of the rules. So, the 180-degree rule that is classical movie making, where you have like a fixed point in space that you never cross, right? 180-degree line. He's shooting from every part of those spaces, and like constantly setting up one illusion after the next. And so it's a movie that really, like, you can just go back to and watch again and see new stuff.
I already saw something new. Unfortunately, it turns out that the Amazon version is the edited version. It's the 2-hour version.
I think also the Criterion is a 2-hour version, though. I don't know if there is another.
There was I say this like I'm some kind of authority, but I read the Wikipedia like an hour ago.
Yeah.
But it's more than I did.
No, I didn't even read the Wikipedia. I read the IMDb. So if IMDb got this wrong, then they really boned me on this one. But there's like 8 or 10 different versions. The one that Tati actually edited down for theaters from the original 158-minute cut is the 124-minute cut that's on the Criterion disc, and the thing that I ended up watching. And then the U.S. theatrical release of it was 93 to 95 minutes, depending on where it was exhibited and where the print was sourced from.
But I definitely, okay, so actually I watched both times it was the 2-hour version, but I saw things when watching it now the second time that I didn't see the first time around. And at first I thought, I wonder if it's watching it on a small screen, because I watched it on the laptop, and now I watched it on a big TV. I don't know, it's like 42 inches or something like that. But I don't think that was it. I think, now as you're describing it and the movie teaching you how to watch it, I think watching it the second time, I knew better how to watch it.
I noticed a huge difference watching it on a large screen versus my laptop.
It's true. I mean, it's also the same with like 2001 or something like that. I would just say, though, for people at home, like if you don't have access to like a projector or a big TV, like I was able to like approximate some of what I felt in the cinema by just getting really close to the laptop screen. And I know this sounds weird, but it is like a Where's Waldo book. So if you just kind of get into that headspace with it, and you put on headphones and stuff, you can kind of immerse yourself in it anyways,
Right. I didn't do any of those things. So it just kind of looked like one of those subreddits where you end up with some buildings like unsecure, like webcam feed of their security footage. Like it's kind of the vibe you get when you don't have headphones on. You're not paying super close attention. It's on a laptop.
Now, I was just going to say, if you're holding up the screen that close to you, I guess it's kind of like if you're sitting in the front row of a movie theater where you don't see the entire screen. You have to keep darting your eyes like left, right, and up and down to capture it.
Yeah, I was going to ask if either of you noticed the cutouts. So in order to fill the background of a lot of these shots, Tati put cutouts of human figures.
Really?
So there's like these
I didn't notice any of
size
them.
black silhouettes, and they'll be standing across from, like, talking to like an actual human. And once you notice it, it's like obviously a fake cutout, but you know, it adds this other element to the movie.
Maybe that, like, because I was getting a little bit of an uncanny valley thing some of the time, right? Because it's like very naturalistic movement. It's like naturalistic first and foremost, I guess, versus, but it's also choreographed. It's just choreographed to look very naturalistic, and it's on such a scale that it looks realistic, but you know that it's choreographed, and so there's that weird kind of tension in that. I guess that, like, you're watching people moving very carefully in order to look like they're not thinking about how they're moving.
There's Thomas Pynchon again. This is now the third episode in which we have Thomas Pynchon mentioned in something that has nothing to do with Thomas Pynchon.
Well, yeah, it's very stylized, right? I mean, it's slapstick comedy.
Uh-huh.
It's just it's slapstick comedy happening in a very experimental way, where there's a lot going on with the way it's shot and the way it's laid out. I mean, my favorite gag in the movie, like, is this early in the film where he's trying to meet that guy in this office building, and Tati does this thing where they each see each other's reflection, but in one case, the guy he's looking for is actually in the building where the camera is positioned, and he's like behind the camera, so his reflection is like going through both panes of glass, and Tati's like chasing him in another building
across the street.
Yeah, and it's a really incredible illusion, right? And it's actually easy to miss because of how we're not used to seeing things like this, like jokes like this. There's another great one, like, you know, in the restaurant scene where there's this woman wearing, like, I think there's women sitting at a table and they're wearing hats with fake flowers in them. And this guy comes over to refill wine glasses, and because of the forced perspective of the shot, it looks like he's watering their hats, right? Because the glasses are obscured in the shot, so you know that's what's happening, but what you're actually looking at is this impossible scenario.
Did you ever laugh out loud? Like you said, there's a lot of slapstick in this, you know, or this sort of, I don't know, very amusing wry slapstick. I found that most of it I wasn't actually laughing out loud. I had this wonderful feeling. There were a few gags that I laughed out loud, like when the part of the ceiling collapses, or there's a divider in the ceiling that he jumps up and he ends up trying to pull something down, and he ends up pulling the whole thing down. All this wooden stuff starts hanging. That one I laughed out loud, and there were a few others. But for the most part, like, it was funny. But I rarely laugh.
I think because it's different kind of joy that this movie inspires, right?
Joy, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it's like a joyful movie. It's like there are some funny gags in it that I do laugh at, and I still laugh at. So, for instance, when the band changes, like when the band first starts at the restaurant, and it's like this very syncopated music, and they just start like immediately. It's very fun because all of a sudden, like, this machine just gets switched on. And I also love the old guy trying to operate the intercom system when Tati first arrives. And then the guy that Tati's supposed to meet, he's supposed to come down this hallway, and the guard is like smoking a cigarette, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we have some time." He's like, "Don't stand up yet," right? It's just like you're just watching this guy walk for a really long time. I also think all of that stuff with the chairs is very funny. So, like, when Tati's he's in the lobby or whatever, and he sits on these chairs and they make these weird sounds. I think that stuff is pretty funny. Like,
the exaggerated. I always love exaggerated sound gags.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Kind of reminded me of the bellboy with Jerry Lewis, the one where he's working in the hotel. There's like a lot of that where he's like pushing something and it just makes the most ungodly squeaking noise every time he's trying to push it. Or like, I think there's a lot of Ernie Kovacs sketches too with the sound thing.
I mean, there's probably a connection there because Jerry Lewis, like Tati, was, you know, I mean, he was a writer-director. He was a director star, right? And also, of course, the French really had an affinity for his filmmaking, right? So I think there's a lot of probably similarity and sensibility there. It's like this idea of the plastic nature of comedy, like of slapstick movies, right? Like, so this willingness to like be inventive with the form and not just have the movie sort of flatly capture, you know, a comedic performance, but actually use the cinema's properties itself to make something funny.
What do you mean plastic?
I just mean like the form itself kind of draws attention to artifice and stylization. So like a lot of comedy movie making suffers from the sort of like, you know, the same kind of representational problem that any cinema does, where it's like it's more focused on capturing a story than on exploring like what are the possibilities of the medium, right? So like another version of Playtime would really be one where you're just noticing the wacky stuff happening, you know, that was in the story, and that's not a very interesting version. You know, like here most of what's inventive is happening with the camera and the set and the music. You know, it's like all of those things.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's Judd Apatow's Playtime, where the entire movie is just three American men in their mid-20s who have not grown up chasing after Barbara.
Yeah,
that's the worst version. That's
Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd, and a third person.
There was an LOL, Ron. That was a genuine LOL. I saw someone pose that question. That's like a deep existential question. It's like somebody posed it the other day. They said, like, how often do you LOL when you type LOL? And I'm like, never. But like, hasn't that just replaced laughing?
Yeah, I mean that's like my operative theory of language is that it does not exist to describe reality. It exists to replace reality, right? And yeah, that totally makes sense. Like it's supposed to, you know, the Derrida thing, right? The chair, the word chair is not there to play nice with the actual chair.
Yeah.
It has its own kind of imperialism.
It's the imperialism of the LOL. There you go. There's somebody's PhD thesis. Go. You have 4 years of solitude. Go write the damn thing.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, it's like we're in fuck it territory.
In what territory? Oh, fuck it. No, I don't think I've ever used LOL or ROFL or ROTFL or
ROTFLOL.
RFTLMAO. No, but I actually think that this was also an interesting movie to watch during these times because, you know,
not a lot of distancing.
Not a lot of distancing, but there was with some of the early parts of the film when the architecture kind of keeps like that one office scene, which we should also mention Terry Gilliam totally saw.
Oh, yeah.
Before making Brazil. So, you know, we're probably going to go into some strange period in architecture once all this is over, right? And I imagine that some of the designs that they come up with for life are going to feel very alienating to us, right? Because they're going to be about keeping us apart from each other. And one of the things I find very interesting about this movie is like none of that is going to prevent people from using spaces that feels most natural to them, right? So, you know, it's always interesting. There's always these cases of like people encountering a space that is just not set up for social life, and they just figure out how to modify it very quickly, right? Sometimes it comes through absolute destruction, and sometimes it's like we just need to move this over here, move that over there, plug a light. You know, it's like when I used to go on tour and I would spend a lot of time in hotel rooms. I would bring my own light bulbs, colored light bulbs, to just create a little mood, or I'd bring some candles, like
oh yeah, I totally get what you're saying, like with the moving thing. Like yeah. I'm not going to get into it, but I was in a bit of a sad, bad mood. As soon as I started putting crap up on the walls, it was like I'm just like I'm like a human thumbs up. I'm just like There's something very therapeutic about just putting some crap up.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but I know it might not be at all. But I know that there's an element of that. Is you're suddenly taking ownership of the place and you're making your own. And something might be cold and sterile, and suddenly, and impersonal. Even if it's not impersonal, it's not yours, and suddenly you're expressing yourself.
Well, I think like the advantages of the situation start to make themselves more apparent.
Yeah.
like when you're actually, because like I feel like I'm pretty good at like putting stuff into a space, but I can't plan it out on paper. I have to just have some thumbtacks, have shelving or whatever, and just start piling it.
Mhm.
Or that doesn't sound good. Tastefully arranging it.
Well, like in my case, I was basically working 50, 60-hour weeks at the cinema, and I was rarely in my apartment. And when this all started in March and I was stuck indoors, I finally started putting some things on the walls because I was like, oh shit, now I have to spend a lot of time in this place. So it has to feel like home.
You didn't have stuff up on the wall before?
I did, like, yeah. I mean, I have some posters up, but it just there were things that I didn't do that I started doing because I was here all the time. I was like, okay, this is going to be my reality for a while. I guess, yeah, the thing that like strikes me about this whole restaurant sequence in the movie is just like how optimistic that is. Like 'cause the movie is definitely a satire for a long time about architecture and about cities,
Right.
and also about tourism. I mean, we didn't really talk about that, but it's about this sort of like the city planners have one idea of how you're going to use these spaces, or the architects have an idea, or somebody has an idea. And that idea has nothing to do with how we naturally want to interact with them. And that just really interests me. And of course, like one of the best gags in that movie is just like the part where those guys are trying to fit the platter of food in the kitchen through the hole in the wall, right? They have that and they're like measuring how big of a hole they need to cut in the wall based on the size of the platter.
And it's not just the platter. The platter already has the fish on it, the fish and the sauce and everything. It's already prepared. It's about to be set. And they even measure. Yeah. They take the tape measure and they measure the platter with the fish on it.
Yeah, he's going to kill me for mentioning this, but my friend Dominic, years ago, when we were in high school together, I had to help his family move, and they had very quickly moved in from one house to another, and they lived in that house for a while. But I guess the move was pretty quick because when I helped him empty out his room after moving again, I noticed that behind this tall bookshelf that I was moving, there was a patch of wall that he never finished painting. Because when he moved in so fast, he was like, well, I'm going to put a bookshelf there anyways. So he just never finished painting the wall. It was a bookshelf-sized patch of old wall. And I thought, yeah, that's something like a teenager would do.
That's something I'm in my 30s and I would still do that.
Well, that's clearly something that people in this movie would do. They'd just be like,
I did that until a week ago. There were all these holes in the walls from putting up different shelving, and I just figure out like, okay, when the new piece of shelving comes in, it's got to kind of hide the other shelving holes, right?
So you didn't fix the holes, you just hid them?
I mean, there was no security deposit. That's so there was no real reason to not put holes in the walls, and there was no real reason to. Well, I mean, there were reasons to hide the holes because the domestic life and everything. But I didn't fix the hole. The holes are still there, as far as I know.
I know. I've got these posters posters and paintings going all along my walls, and there's definitely holes back there from previous tenants. So there's a few, the ones that are exposed, but most of the time I actually picked the location of where I hung something. I did it based on the holes that were already there to cover them rather than fill them in, because I knew I'm fill them in and that takes extra work, and I have to match it, and I don't want to paint over it too. So so there's holes behind all these posters. So I made it my own, but without fixing up. It's not cabinet sized or dressed or whatever it was.
Bookshelf, yeah.
It wasn't. It's not. They're not bookshelf sized, but they're hidden by.
Oh yeah, when I was moving my stuff and I finally got to see the bare walls, it just looked like it looked like an illiterate person tried to like write their name out with like a small handgun on the wall, like every wall. Like the Punisher, I think in the comics he did that sometimes. You just get like a bazooka and it's like, here's the little Punisher skull, and I just blew it out of a concrete wall with the bazooka, right? But just sort of, but like that. But like for somebody who signs their checks with an X, right? It's just a lot of.
Well, look, there was no security deposit.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not. This is not regret because I didn't have to fill in the holes. This is This is like my O.J. Simpson "if I did it" moment because I totally did it.
Yeah. You know what can work is toothpaste.
That was
Very
a
I
college dorm
fixed
trick.
Mom
my
told me that
headlights
one.
on my car. They like if you got yellowing on the headlights of your car, which it gets over time. I thought it was the plastic degrading. It was just dirty, and I just put some toothpaste on it, rubbed it with a cloth, and now they're working just like they did when I
Yeah.
bought the car.
No, no kidding.
This is using toothpaste as filler though, like instead of
Hmm.
whatever that stuff is you buy at the
Oh,
hardware store.
spackle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
spackle.
instead of spackle, use toothpaste.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, also when we painted the bar here at our cinema because we had a bar as well, I made some rather unfortunate holes in the wall as well, and you can fill them with I think it was like newspaper or something. You
They
wad up
got
some newspaper and
toothpaste
then you paint it.
glasses. You can take like scratches out of glasses if you just gently rub like a small amount of toothpaste in a circle, then like wipe it off with a damp cloth so that the toothpaste settles evenly.
Really? Oh, Dan,
Yeah, I mean that or like alcohol because a lot of
Yeah,
times like isopropyl alcohol, just because a lot of the stuff that looks like it's damage to glasses is actually just like grease from your nose.
yeah.
gosh, Dan, I wish you would have told me this a few weeks ago. I got these glasses because my last glasses had a few scratches that were directly in front of my eyes. So no matter how much I clean them.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna like work miracles, but it works a lot better than like anybody that tells you that you can fix a scratch CD with toothpaste is just trying to ruin your CDs. Doesn't work. I've tried it. You need a professional machine to refurbish that stuff. But
Have you have you guys seen these videos of people repairing things with ramen?
Are you serious?
no,
Yeah, so apparently ramen makes a pretty good I don't know what you call that, like filler or whatever.
I mean it's like glue, right? If you overcook it.
Yeah, what they do is they like repair object. Like I think there's one where a guy repairs a toilet bowl with ramen, uh, and they just like and then they paint it to match and everything. It looks like a hell of a lot more work than replacing the thing, but they're really happy with themselves. Yeah, just look up like ramen repair, and it's just like hours of YouTube fun.
I think I just found my next 6 months of quarantine activity. Well, it's weird. In upstate New York here, like at the quarantine, like people they wear masks to go into stores, but everybody they're just like over it.
What do you mean?
Like I don't know. It seems like everybody has this like very. I mean, I guess because stuff got a bit better in New York, but it seems like everybody's a lot less paranoid about it here than they were in Boston, which is. I mean, I guess it's like much lower population density,
Right.
but like I literally have no neighbors right now.
Okay.
Yeah, you live, what are you, 100 miles from your next neighbor, roughly?
No, there's just like a farm stand about 100 feet down the street that's just like somebody's driveway. I finally
Yeah.
bought some vegetables. I've been like moving my collection back and forth all week and just living out of the throughway.
Uh-huh.
Well, count yourself lucky. We just got masks here. What is it, September 28th? And
Oh, Jesus.
the mayor of Amsterdam said maybe people should start wearing masks now that we're in the middle of a second wave. Like, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I've been wearing one since March, but
Well, you get funny looks, right?
oh yeah, there's you know how there's shaming against people who don't wear masks in the States?
Yeah.
It's the opposite here. They heard that thing about how the masks give you a false sense of security, or you might infect yourself if you touch a surface and then touch your mask. They believe all that here.
I mean, is there any real sense of security left? I mean, this is 2020.
Well,
Like, I'm clinging on to whatever shamanistic rituals I have.
I mean, I have really good internet.
Yeah. The
And I have-
closest thing I have to a sense of security is that this thing will record, and even that, I'm like, keep checking. Is it still recording? Is it still recording? And when it's done, oh God, I hope it saves. I hope it saves properly and that it doesn't crash or something like that. So, okay, I don't even have a sense of security about that. So,
I have enough movies to watch, enough books to read.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be dead before I finish reading and watching everything.
I've got a lot of books to read that I know I will never read.
Yeah.
I do have a DVD collection in case internet is shut off by the government. Okay, I know this is a little paranoid, but there's a little tiny bit of me that knows like, hey, that could happen. That's happened in other countries.
Yeah. But he's
Maybe we
going to
should
take
do
away
a movie,
TikTok.
like an episode about how to watch movies when the grid collapses. 'Cause that's like I remember when I went into this prepper store in South Carolina when I was driving around to make the movie, and it was just like these like 30-pound tubs of dried blueberries, and then these self-published books about how to make your own makeup to stay pretty for your man after the grid collapses.
Uh-huh.
And I was just but so
Wow.
there's a market, like we could totally just
Well, you know,
the world's ended, what's on.
when yeah, I think it was like early April when I I realized that I was like that Burgess Meredith character in Twilight Zone.
Oh
You
my god,
remember
yeah.
where like he loves to read books, but he's annoyed by all the people that are constantly interrupting him. And then he's one of the last people on Earth because the Earth has been destroyed in some sort of apocalypse, and he's just sitting around reading books. And then one day he breaks his glasses. But like, okay, sorry, spoiler for the end of that one. But
Your old Twilight Zone
I
episode.
spoiled that a few because I felt the exact same thing about the same. It's just like my glasses are still here, so it's like I won.
yeah, I was just like, that's me with all the movie torrents. Like, I've got like 200 movies on my hard drive to watch, and now I've got all the time in the world to watch them.
Thankfully, thankfully we've got good internet. So I watch a movie with you
Yeah.
once every 2-3 nights.
Yeah.
That's how we got.
The amazing thing to me is that there's all these normies complaining about what's going to happen when we run out of new TV seasons and like when there's no movies being made for the next couple of years. I'm like, that's great. I can catch up. I don't care about the next season of some show. Like,
I've got 100 years of movies to catch up.
exactly. I just watch all of Marilyn Monroe's movies. Like, don't make any more shows. I haven't even seen The Sopranos before.
Hey,
Wait, have you seen The Sopranos?
I've never seen The Sopranos.
Oh, I mean, I never saw it till like a year ago. I'm just kind of pulling that out of my ass, but it was good. It's worth the look.
Well, you consider it one of the best TV shows ever made, right?
I mean, everybody does, right? That's like saying Illmatic is one of the best hip hop records. Like, nobody's really arguing about that. But I do think that Deadwood was the better show.
Okay.
So I've never seen The Sopranos, but I rewatched a movie the other night from early '90s that Edie Falco is in, where she played, and it's a gangster movie, but it's like baby Edie Falco. She must have been like 23 or something. It's called Laws of Gravity. Have either of you heard of this movie?
Oh wait, it's like the same time she was on Homicide: Life on the Street a lot.
Maybe it's like 92 or 93.
I saw it. I never saw that movie, but I was watching. I've been watching through all of Homicide: Life on the Street, and yeah, she looks so young. I mean, I guess because she is so young, right? But like, I'm just hearing stories like the mom on The Sopranos, and then
it has nothing at all to do with Playtime. It's about as far away as we can imagine from that. But I really recommend Laws of Gravity. It's something else. It's like a documentary style portrait of like very low level Brooklyn Irish mobsters, like not even mobsters, just guys that are like breaking into cars and stealing things, right?
That sounds fun.
I would describe it as like a proto mumblecore Mean Streets. It has like the same basic plot as Mean Streets, but like you feel like you're just watching a documentary about these type of guys that lived in Brooklyn in like the early '90s. It's a really interesting movie. I think the guy's name was Nick Gomez, the guy who directed it. He directed like 2 great movies, and then he went into television.
What else did you direct?
Something called New Jersey Drive, which was executive produced by Spike Lee. So, and that I think was about teenagers stealing cars. So he had like a couple of movies in that period, and they're like fly on the wall, like very realistic portraits of like early gentrification Brooklyn. You know, like when there was still like Edie Falco in a denim vest with her loser boyfriend. That's the kind of characters these are.
Dan, you've seen Mean Streets, right?
yeah, I've seen.
I haven't.
When you were talking about that, I watched Trees Lounge the other day for
Oh yeah,
a really long time. Yeah, like the vibes kind of like that, like shitty Long Island, shitty that like area.
yeah, like early '90s New York indie cinema. Like, well, I think Trees Lounge is still pretty stylized. You know, like Steve Buscemi directed that, right? Or yeah, okay, yeah. I haven't seen that in years, but
It's got, Danny Baldwin destroys his ice cream truck with a baseball bat.
Okay.
And that's why he's the most underrated Baldwin.
Wait, maybe I've seen this.
It's the one where he's like a drunk and then he sleeps with Chloe Savini. She's like way younger than he is, and then her dad, who's played by Danny Baldwin, gets like pissed off, and and the guy who dies, who's the ice cream truck driver before Steve Buscemi, is Seymour Cassel, who's in almost not every John Cassavetes movie. Well, he's in the credits of almost every John Cassavetes movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's the star of Minnie and Moskowitz, which is one of my favorite Cassavetes movies.
Oh yeah, that's one we should cover on the show for sure.
Yeah.
It's like there's no other movie quite like, not quite to the same extent as Playtime, but I can't think of a romantic comedy quite like Minnie and Moskowitz. It's a weird movie.
A John Cassavetes rom-com?
It's like his version of It Happened One Night, basically.
Okay.
Sort of.
I heard a podcast where they compared it to Punch Drunk Love in the sense that it's got this kind of like it's a very offbeat romantic comedy, I guess. I think it's an okay comparison, but it's hard because it's hard to compare Cassavetes to most things. I think they're sort of singular movies. I have a funny, well, not terribly interesting, but funny story about Seymour Cassel.
Okay.
About 10 or 12 years ago, I went to the Las Vegas Film Festival, and Seymour Cassel was one of the guests there. And I sat behind him, and he talked on his cell phone for the entire movie. I can't even remember what the movie was anymore. I just was like, wow, the balls, just to sit there and just talk on your cell phone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was interesting. It was short and interesting, and
yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
Got to the punchline very quickly.
That's all. I just saw the back of his head for 2 hours while he was talking on the phone. And I'm not going to be the guy to tell Seymour Cassel to shut up during the movie.
Oh, I would.
Those are my favorite kind of celebrity encounters, though, right? Like I saw Alex Jones once by himself watching sports bloopers, eating a burrito in a restaurant in Austin. And I was going to go, because I was like 12 or something. I just knew him as like somebody connected to Bill Hicks. This was way before he got the megaphone. But it was just such a perfect image. And, now it's like every time the guy's on the news, I just think of this sad, fat man eating a burrito by himself.
Yeah. Well, I'm jealous of anyone in Austin because they have amazing burritos there.
Oh, and grilled cheese.
True, yeah, you could have been eating a way worse burrito.
Yeah, Austin really has the Mexican food dialed in.
Yeah, that's something that I'm never gonna get in the Northeast. I finally found a decent Mexican place in Boston right before I moved. But
it's good that you mentioned Alex Jones though, because people don't talk enough about the fact that we really have Richard Linklater to blame for Alex Jones.
I think like Joe Rogan and Doug Stanhope and the whole Sacred Cow thing. That's how I found them initially when I was a kid. I heard these Bill Hicks records. And and like it blew my mind. And I go onto the website and they're like, you should go check out these three things: Doug Stanhope, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones.
Yeah,
and I was, I'm like 12. I'm like, yeah, fuck the man.
And now in 2020, they're like 3 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I'm kidding, of course, but I was actually Doug Stanhope that gave me a videotape of Alex Jones and said, hey, you should watch this. But I think, back then, Alex Jones was, I don't know if you ever saw early Alex Jones. This is a really weird claim.
Oh yeah, the video where he's outside Waco.
Yeah, well, like there's early Alex Jones where he's not quite right wing. Like he's more like classically libertarian in the sense that like sometimes he's actually seems to be on the right side of an issue in the early stuff, right?
Right. I remember when I was a kid, that was the only site that was reporting on the Supreme Court making decisions about stuff because they made some huge decisions about eminent domain in the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
It basically made it so if you're a corporation, you can petition the government to use it. That was the only place I saw anything about that.
Huh. Yeah.
There was some stuff coming through there that was decent, and then I think he just realized that the money was elsewhere.
Yeah, he did stuff about the police stopping people, without war, without cause and stuff like that. But then the reason I brought up Richard Linklater is outside of those of us weirdos who were just attracted to conspiracy stuff, Alex Jones was basically unknown to the world except through, I think he was in almost every Richard Linklater movie for a period of time.
Really?
So like
He's in Waking Life with the megaphone.
He's also in
which
Slacker.
other ones was he in?
He's in Slacker as well.
Wait, he's in Slacker?
Yeah, he's one of the characters in Slacker. He's just playing himself, I think.
How did I forget? I always remember it as that movie that the lady from Glass Eye was in, but I guess that's because I'm a weirdo.
Yeah. Well, didn't your sister's
my older sister lives out in Texas. The woman who's on the poster and the DVD cover of
But I can't remember though. It's been so long.
Oh yeah, no, but she was in a really good band that was like, they're kind of like the Talking Heads, but not really. They were called Glass Eye. They put out like 4 records on Bar None in the late 80s. And then she showed up in Slacker, and then she shows up in that Daniel Johnston documentary because Johnston was like obsessed with and borderline stalking her after she did a tribute album to him.
Huh. But now I've got to go back and
but now she bakes pies for a living. She's got like a whole website and my sister says the pies are pretty good. So
okay,
Matthew McCarty pie
in Austin.
In Austin, yeah.
So good pies, good tacos.
Good pies, good tacos, and every once in a while, they had one of my favorite record covers of all time. I'd have to send the picture, but it's a picture of this bathroom graffiti that they called the Suck Monster. And it's like this half man, half woman, half dinosaur with a penis, and it's got like, oh god, I'll find it. The record's called Every Woman's Fantasy.
But so what I'm hearing is that when the pandemic's over, the 3 of us are going to meet up in Austin.
Oh yeah, I need some tacos.
Yeah, South by Southwest Festival.
All right, there we go.
Just sitting in a room full of people waiting for whatever's going to hit us next.
Are you waiting for the third wave?
The third wave.
Maybe it's the 5th by then.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure, not to belabor this point, because I'm not Googling, although I guess we could.
Yeah.
I think Alex Jones is also in Waking Life. And again, it works quite well because Waking Life is a paranoid movie. But I did have this wonder early on if Linklater was exploiting Alex Jones or if he actually did believe in his stuff. But obviously at this point, he can no longer believe in it.
I kind of got the sense that Linklater saw him as like a townie character.
Yeah,
right?
local color. Yeah,
with townies.
It really did feel like if you ever went to Austin, you were in danger of ending up in a perpetual like stoned dorm room conversation. Because if you watch Linklater's movies, it's always the same type of conversation. And my closest, yeah, it's always these people philosophizing or spinning weird conspiracy theories. Stuff I had a lot more patience for about 15 years ago.
Yeah, they're like really great. They're great movies when you're like 16 through like 20 something. And yeah, I gotta say, like when I've gone back to like Before Sunrise, or like Dazed and Confused, yeah, just it feels like so it's sort of like you got Jean Renoir, and then you got Robert Altman, and then like the Shasta Cola in this equation is Richard Linklater.
By the way, I'm Googling right now. I'm looking up Alex Jones in Slacker. I'm trying to figure out which character he is.
I want to know how many Linklater movies he's been in. I swear he's been in like 5 or 6. He
wasn't in Dazed and Confused. I don't think I ever saw I never saw Newton Boys or Suburbia.
Yeah, Suburbia is an Eric Bogosian adaptation, so I don't think it's only when he has these like a lot of characters or something. But I actually like all those. I watched Dazed and Confused not too long ago, and I still liked it. It's that in real life I avoid those kind of conversations, but in his movies I don't mind them so much. But it's funny because I guess the sort of later version of that kind of aesthetic, like the Before Sunrise aesthetic, is like mumblecore movies, and I still like those quite a bit. Like I love Andrew Bajowski's movies, or
oh yeah, I wanted to rewatch. Because when I first got to college, the IFC Center
Yeah.
was doing their first ever Mumblecore retrospective. I didn't know anybody, so I went to every single movie because I just didn't have anything else to do at night. And yeah, I haven't seen Funny Haha or Mutual Appreciation in like a really long time. But those,
Yeah.
I feel like those were the stand like that and Frownland.
Frownland's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like the what is it? The Duplass brother move, like the not the comfy chair.
Puffy chair. Yeah. The Duplass
The
brothers.
puffy chair. That's what it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the puffy chair. I feel like that didn't hold up quite as well.
Well, you know, Ronald Bronstein, the guy who directed Frownland, he's the editor of most of the Safdie brothers movies.
Huh. That makes sense.
And he also, I think he co-wrote. I'm talking out of my ass here, but I think he might have co-wrote Uncut Gems. But anyways, you can see the connection because, like, especially Uncut Gems is has a lot in common with Frownland. You know, like not just stylistically, but also in its interest in a very like alienating character. And yeah, also goes back to that like New York Independent, that kind of scuzzy New York movie. But yeah, I think Mutual Appreciation is one of my favorites of that genre. And then
I don't think I ever saw Beeswax or Computer Chess, so I'm like behind that stuff.
So those are both very good, but like he made a movie a few years ago called Support the Girls, like 2 years ago. Did either of you see that?
No.
I didn't know it existed.
Yes,
That's really
yes.
good.
Who's the star of that?
I can't remember her name, but it takes place in a Texas, like it's like a restaurant that's like a Hooters restaurant. It's a restaurant, and it's just this like takes place over the course of one day, and it's this kind of just movie about female friendship and shitty service jobs, and it's really good. I mean, he kind of like subsumes his like style into this more like regular movie.
It's Regina Hall. It's Regina
Hall, right? Yeah, it's a very good performance. It's like such a good movie.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know it's from the same guy, even though it has that same kind of realistic dialogue, whatever that means. Yeah.
The reason I saw it was because of Regina Hall, because I saw her in something and it sounds like I want to see everything Regina Hall is in. Like every so often I get
really good in it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, realistic dialogue, that's like all those people who heard our podcast and copied that thing we do where the people talk over each other.
Yeah. Well, like the whole idea behind Mumblecore is that they got the name, like it was like the sound engineer for Funny Haha said that he had a hard time like miking the scenes because people were mumbling too much, and that's where Mumblecore came from. So it like wasn't like a positive designation, right? It was more like a technical problem.
Now I'm looking up Funny Haha and I'm trying to figure out if I've seen it. I don't think I have.
That one was shot near Harvard. That I feel like I'd recognize a lot of the locations now if I watched it again.
No, I just read the description. I have not seen it.
What's interesting is like I know that people would connect like Wachowski's movies to Cassavetes, but as far as I know, Cassavetes used a lot of improvisation. And what's interesting about Wachowski is that he's scripted everything.
Cassavetes scripted everything.
But there's a lot more improvisation, isn't there, in the performance?
The first version of Shadows has improvisation. The rest of it, the only improvisation is in the movement.
Okay.
The actual dialogue. We can put one of those card links here because we talked about that at length a few episodes ago.
That was the first episode of the second season. So the last episode of the first season was Matt when you were on last time, and then new season Cassavetes.
Oh yeah, that was the first wave, right?
That was the first wave. Yeah,
I was younger then.
That was when we were paranoid in a different way.
Yeah.
One thing was making the world fall apart as opposed to everything.
Yeah.
That's when we realized that most Americans' greatest fear is not being able to wipe their ass.
Yeah. That was one hug ago.
So speaking of playtime, how's that for a transition?
Yeah, that's flashback.
There we go. So
flashback to 1967.
Flashback to 1967. So Matt, I know you gave reasons, not thematic reasons for showing it, like having to do directly with the cinema, but it's also it's one of your favorite or your number one favorite movie?
It's like if people ask me, I come up with that one.
Okay.
More times than not, but like I think we've talked about this before. Like favorite movie is also like it changes over the course of your life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point where I don't have a favorite movie. I've got my top 20 or so, and that list keeps growing. And I think this is now added. I think this is now part of that list.
Yeah.
That's sort of my gut. We'll see in a week where that is. I've got like 3 that I call my favorite. Like I don't have a number 1, and then the other 20, and then it's somewhere.
But that being said, I still haven't seen Traffic, so I've seen every Tati film except Traffic, and actually this last time of watching Playtime, I decided, okay, I want to watch Traffic finally,
Okay.
which is the movie he made after it.
Oh, there we go. Let's watch that together. I
Yeah,
haven't.
we can watch that. Yeah.
I'm not even sure I've seen Mon Oncle. I remember in French class we had to watch it, and I think I remember I went to the video store to get it. They were out of it, but they had Mon Oncle d'Amérique, which is my American uncle, which I thought was a sequel. It is not. It's a movie starring Gerard Depardieu, and I have no idea what it's about because I kept falling asleep. I couldn't follow what was going on, and I just
Alan Renee, right?
What was that?
It's Alan Renee, I think, or something.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. It's like
I
somebody.
wouldn't know what was going on if you were awake either.
Yeah.
I think that there's like a guy and like his brother has a kid.
Well, that explains the uncle part.
Yeah, that was what I took away from it.
All right. There is an uncle. And in Tati's movie, he is an uncle. So there we go. That's the same movie, right? So
right. It's a feature length adaptation of that Roger Miller song, "My Uncle Used to Love Me, But She Died." Right. That could be an Alan Renee movie. There's enough like time fuckery there.
But Matt, what about it puts it in your go-to top movie?
I think that like I said, like I think that there's, well, first of all, like the thing of like favorite movies, usually has to do with like the hypothetical is if you had 2 hours of someone's attention, what would you show them? Like that you wanted to show your excitement about, or how you look at things. And it's like, it's funny because if I were to think about like what are the things that I actually spend most of my time watching, it tends to be other things. I like watch a lot of horror cinema. I watch a lot of genre. I watch a lot of documentaries. I don't actually watch a lot of like slapstick comedy or comedy in general,
right.
But there's something about the optimism of the movie that I find really interesting, that it like kind of irresistible, because the movie is both very good satire in that it's deeply critical of certain parts of society,
right?
And yet there's this like genuine sort of optimism in all of it. So it's a very light, like even while he's being critical, he's there's a certain of lightness of spirit about it, right?
It's a joyous, optimistic satire, and you don't have that much with satire.
There's just something, it's not very heavy, and the truth is, I like outside of this, like my natural tendency is to like movies that are darker or like sometimes are like more critical of society or whatever. And this is a movie that like just feels like a gift in some ways. It feels like a very generous act, like not just apart from the fact that he bankrupted himself and spent 3 years making it, but it's such a gift to the senses, right? Like there's so much happening with the way it draws your eyes and ears around the movie, and that like Tati actually, on the one hand, made a movie that children could watch, that people of any age could watch, literally people who don't speak any of the languages in the movie could watch, and yet he also valued their intelligence enough to do very complex things in the movie. So it's like, like he didn't have to do that, but everything in that movie is rewarding, and it assumes that the audience can engage with it, right? And to large part, it proves that it can, right? So it sets up these these ways of looking at it and these ways of interacting with it, and then over time you get the joke. You see what he's showing you, and maybe you see things that he didn't intend to show you too, because there's just so much to look at. And so it's the idea almost that the movie's almost like a toy or a game.
Right, it has that feeling of being kind of like an object, like you can walk around it in a way that you can't with other movies.
Yeah, he puts you inside of the scene. Oftentimes things happen, like I say, behind this 180-degree line, right? And this is a movie that is staged in 360, right? It's very immersive in that way, and yeah, maybe it's just an object thing, Also, I guess I read somewhere that Tati said, his other movies were about this character, this sort of character who's having these misadventures, and this is a movie that's about no one. And then the person who wrote this article pointed out, well, actually, it's about everyone, right? So by being about no one in particular, it's about people. And I guess this sounds a little hippie or whatever, but it really is this movie that has a very generous humanism, right? Yeah. Despite it being basically about contraptions, technology, architecture, it's about people. Yeah. Despite having no character with names except for Barbara,
Right.
Very minimal plot.
I think it's good you touched on that, because I wasn't quite getting the optimism before you explained it. I guess to me it was sort of, no one seems to have, everyone's just sort of alienated from these surfaces. There's no, everything is surfaces, right? It's like this ultimate postmodern movie. Everything is surfaces. There's no possibility of deeper connection to one's surroundings, I guess, outside of I guess the fact that there's so many people there. There's sort of that Hobbesian Leviathan thing going on, this greater whole coming out of the mass. But just the architecture, it seemed like this shrug at I guess modernism and
yeah,
brutalist architect. It seems like the extreme dead end of Chaplin's Modern Times is the transitional slapstick comedy about technology taking over the world, where it's still framed as there's some alternative.
Yeah.
But then in Playtime, there's no alternative. It's just the thing exists and you're watching it, and there's nothing outside of the building. As you and Ron were discussing earlier, that you never see any of the actual Paris. You're just in this maze of mirrors, and rectangles.
At one point, Barbara actually says, "Oh, that's the real Paris," and she's pointing at this flower stand on the sidewalk that she wants to get a photograph of. And I've definitely been that person who's been in a foreign country, including the one I live in, and have been "Oh, wait, this is the real Amsterdam." And you trying to compose this shot, and meanwhile, there's all these modern or anachronistic things going on in the background that are ruining the shot for you, right? Because they don't look like the consensus idea of what Paris is, right? But to me, all of that he sets up, erupts. It implodes in the last part of the movie, right? Another reference that someone mentioned when watching it the other night was, the whole scene that takes place in the after hour. What do they call that? Like a bar or a cafe?
The drugstore.
Yeah.
What?
The drugstore across the street?
The drugstore, right. So when they first introduced the drugstore, it's this kind of weird, almost alien place. The sounds are really weird, and none of the food looks appetizing.
Oh, that looks disgusting, yeah.
And my friend said this looks just like Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, when they shoot it from outside. And it's true, it has this kind of lonely quality about it.
Right.
But then for me, everything that happens from the destruction of the restaurant straight to the end of the movie seems to be where that optimism comes back, right? And then everything, everything from there on has this joyous quality that I can't really articulate, but it's there, yeah.
Ending with the carousel, ending with 10 minutes of the rotary or the roundabout, the traffic circle, and all the cars and buses going around sort of very slowly. And the music becomes a little bit of carousel music. And at one point you see, say, a scooter going by. There's the man driving it, and the woman in the back is bouncing up and down. And some of the cars are kind of bouncing a little bit. And then at one point we're seeing again through a window, and there's somebody cleaning the window. And he opens the window and flips a bit, and you see the reflection of the people in the bus, the one that the tourists are on.
Yeah.
And the bus goes down, and they all kind of lean back and forward as if the bus had just jumped. And then he moves the window again and moves it back, and they all kind of lean back and lean forward as if the bus had just jumped again. And that repeats about 5 times.
Right, and this
window, so joyous.
Right, and the window also makes a sound, which is also echoed by the people on the bus, like going "woo" or something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. And like, I also think like, so Dan, are you less sold on this optimism reading for the end of the film?
I feel like even the second time through, and honestly, I don't know if I would even count the first time at this point. I don't feel like I have a strong enough grasp on what's actually going on in the movie.
Uh-huh.
Like it feels like one of those things where if I watch it another 5 times, and this is kind of like that discussion we were having about Perfect Lives a few episodes ago, like I feel like I could come to a lot of different readings, and I think it's purposely structured as an object where you can't come to a final reading.
Yeah.
It's like a purposely incomplete, like Finnegan's Wake or something, right? It just starts over again. I mean, not that it does this, but it has its own ways of circumventing you kind of grasping it fully.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true, but I think this is the case where like this is a movie that is obviously very intelligent in its design, and yet like for me it's not a cerebral experience, right? So I'm aware of like the satire, and it's something that Tati does in other films, right? Where he's commenting on modern society, technology mostly, right? But the feeling that it leaves me with is not a negative one, right? Or even a cerebral or intellectual one. It's one of being kind of delighted by what he does with the medium, right? And that like the movie kind of crescendos with a scene of people like enjoying themselves, like sitting around a piano, drinking wine.
Yeah.
You know, like none of that could have been anticipated by everything else in the movie.
Well, I think it's so different in construction from other slapstick movies because I feel like my go-to way of analyzing slapstick, and like I was obsessed with slapstick for like a year or two. I watched like I think I've seen every Silent Buster Keaton movie and Charlie Chaplin movie. I've seen all the Harry Langdon movies that Frank Capra did. I've seen almost every Jerry Lewis movie. And my way of reading those things was always the physical comedy as a manifest. It's like a literary first person, like especially in Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis, it's always like he's a lot like David Lynch that way. Like whenever something starts to go weird or like something breaks, it's reflecting the Jerry Lewis character's inner anxieties.
Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, there's also like in the Lewis movies, particularly, there's this weird schizophrenic relationship between him being a boss and an employee. Like, there's all those like fantasy, like the famous one is the typewriter sequence from Who's Minding the Store, where he just pretends he's typing out some kind of business memo for like 2 minutes. But yeah, and Tati he's not a psychological director. There's not not any of that there. So it's sort of like I guess, yeah, I would need to watch it again, I think, before I could come to like a reading I would stand behind for a few months anyway.
Well, I think like for me and I don't know, I haven't watched as much slapstick as you, but the closest comparison is probably for me is Keaton. And it has to do with that formal control, right? And also like the very sophisticated like illusions that Keaton pulled off, right?
Right. I almost feel like it makes more sense to me if I look at it almost like Michael Snow's Wavelength more than like a Buster Keaton movie, like that Canadian movie where the guy's just kind of zooming in and out between walls. And
it's like a 40-minute zoom.
Both architecture, cinema, but
yeah, but Wavelength is very much about the flattening of three-dimensional space into two-dimensional space, and this is like PlayTime seems to like add dimensions to the image. You know, it's like
right. It's like the rules of the game thing, right? There's always a midground, foreground, background, but in this case, there's like multiple midgrounds.
Yeah, there's lots of planes going on. Yeah.
High grounds.
Yeah, but I think, but the thing that you mentioned, Wavelength, I think is interesting because this is a slapstick movie, but it's also an experimental film. Like it's an experimental movie, and probably for a lot of people, it's much more accessible than like a lot of experimental movies they might watch because it's not always clear that you're watching an experimental movie. But
which is funny to me because
Wait, my hand.
I feel like I found a lot of experimental movies far easier to crack than Playtime.
well, that's probably true because they're just doing something formal with the experimentation. There's no story, right?
Right.
I mean, Wavelength has like a joke of a little narrative in it, right? But it's mostly just look at what a zoom shot can do,
Right.
right? Which
Right,
is
but even like Bruce Connor's Report, like I feel like I could, and that's a pretty complicated movie with a bunch of stuff. I mean, there's not, I guess there's sort of an implied narrative there. They're not similar films in any way, shape, or form, but for some reason I just find like symbolically related images easier to follow the narrative.
yeah.
Might have been just something I trained myself to do when I was in college.
But yeah, earlier I was saying I'm raising my hand. I'm the person for whom this was the more accessible experimental film. This is the one that I can handle and I get. And without describing it, I wonder if some of it is also you guys are very analytical when you talk about movies, and I'll say this will sound pejorative. I'll say use a lot of big words. A lot of it is going over my head. The way the sort of the deep incisive stuff. When like I don't know, a while back we had a friend. Alex, we watched Close Encounters, and Dan and Alex got into this whole thing about talking about the Cold War and all this kind of stuff. And at one point I said, yeah, but this is also a movie about aliens. People wanted to go see a movie about spaceships and aliens. So, that's the movie I'm seeing. I didn't see the Cold War.
But like, okay, maybe this is a good point of comparison here to what I'm trying to say is 2001, because
which I love.
I guess what I'm getting at is
another movie I never got into.
Okay, yeah. Did you see it in 70 millimeter?
No, I saw a VHS tape and I turned it off initially because I thought it was broken because there was no sound for 20 minutes.
Did not see the film.
No, you cannot watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you cannot watch Lawrence of Arabia on anything smaller than a 40-inch TV. Okay. And really, you have to see it on the big
70 millimeter.
Yeah.
I should rewatch all the Tarkovsky movies while I got this projector thing set up.
Yeah.
I always loved like Solaris. I love the fact the space station looks so cluttered and dirty. Like that. I mean, I guess like Tarkovsky complained about that in his journals, but something about Kubrick, everything seemed like it didn't have enough grime for me because I was like spoiled.
I was the reverse. I love how clean and antiseptic it is, and how inhuman it is. And the only human character in the whole movie is Hal, the computer. So, but Matt, you were saying what you were comparing Tati to 2001.
Well, I guess what I was going to say is I see some comparisons between the movies in the sense that, first of all, they're both like 70 millimeter, made for 70 millimeter widescreen, and they're both like those filmmakers making like a capital A art movie, right? Like they're doing, or we could say like a very like big scale experimental film, because in both cases they're barely narrative, and they're pure cinema in the sense that it's all about images and sound, right. This kind of very elemental approach to movies, and yet both are deeply critical, right? So like 2001, right. if you pay attention to it on one level, it's a rather dark movie, just like most of Kubrick's work. But how does it leave you feeling, right? So that's my point too about Playtime. It's like, yeah, it's criticizing this modernist architecture and tourism and all these social rituals, and yet it leaves me feeling transported, like it, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And that's also 2001. Like, even at the end, depending on how you read the ending of 2001, and I have a very negative reading of it, I'm like elated at the end of that movie. So that has a lot to do with like what else is going on besides on the level of story.
It ends with Dave Bauman becoming a big giant space baby watching over Earth. Innocence and protection and
spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, sorry, spoiling a 70s.
I don't think he's watching.
I mean, he's
watching over Earth.
Well,
it's because he got back that sled, right?
Yeah, the sled that was named after his mistress's butthole. Yes. There, we covered it.
Oh yeah, we finally spoiled. We finally after a whole year of me whiting out Dan from spoiling Citizen Kane. I'm the one that spoiled it in the end.
I thought we talked about it on the last episode I was on.
Yeah, but
Did you guys-
I blanked it out.
Oh wow.
Season, yeah.
I
Well
blanked.
done.
Yeah, I put white nose over Dan, and maybe you spoiled it too. You know, so every so often, every time Sled came up, I put white noise, and then I said it all the way at the end.
Oh wait, we actually we heard that good Citizen Kane story from John about the hole in the sound stage.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever heard this, but so the final shot in Citizen Kane, right, where they're zooming out and we're
Yeah.
seeing all the crap in Xanadu in boxes. They dug a hole in the floor to get the camera in the right position for that shot. And when Wells left the sound stage, they left the hole there.
Sounds
And
right.
later on, that became the Star Trek sound stage. And every iteration of Star Trek, the captain's chair is positioned directly over the hole in the sound stage.
I believe it.
You heard it here first,
The more you know.
or maybe second time. John,
If it's not on IMDb trivia, it's fake news.
That and $1.50 will get you some coffee.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm teaching a film class right now, and I'm debating how much Citizen Kane trivia I'm going to drop in that class. But I think,
Better
I'm gonna leave
than the butthole.
think I might leave that part out. It's not really essential to a formalist analysis. Do you see any connection to the 2001, or you just think I'm smoking something here?
To Tati, to Playtime.
Yeah, no, just like making this comparison about what the movie might be saying and how negative or critical that is versus the feeling that it leaves you with as an experience.
Yeah. Oh, right. 2001 is very critical, and it's dark, and I still come out of there somewhat elated.
Yeah.
But you said you have a very dark reading of the end, because I said it's the space baby watching over Earth.
Oh God. Yeah, this is part of a larger rant I have about transhumanism.
Okay.
Because how do I put this very succinctly? You know that like basically transhumanists are heavily influenced by science fiction, and 2001 has come up in some of the transhumanist literature, and it suggests to me that they have a very strange reading of the movie, right? Because my understanding of 2001 is that at the end of this, so there's some sort of artificial intelligence which is guiding human evolution, right? That's
Right.
established in the movie. And then somehow at the end, Dave Bowman becomes, by pursuing this journey, he becomes the next phase of human evolution,
Okay.
right? And this is exactly what transhumanists talk about when they talk about the singularity, is humans merging with artificial intelligence, right? To become some new super kind of human, right?
Right.
The problem for me is they forget that Kubrick was essentially, a pessimist, right? And
That's like
regardless-
everybody mistook Marshall McLuhan for like a guy who had the best stereo setup in Canada. Right, but he was like this diehard Catholic who was just afraid of all this stuff, so he wrote about it.
Yeah, just so like what I'm saying is they transhumanists think that everything that we're doing now to become like to achieve the singularity is leading us towards the next phase of evolution, right? And what's shown there at the end of the movie is some sort of new phase of evolution where he becomes the space baby. And I'm like, another way to think about this is he's a helpless baby floating through space, right? Like,
just like all of us.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this could also be a dark vision, because like if we're all like if we're all like basically dead in the body and brain and jacked into like some supercomputer which is guiding us through virtual reality, then we're all extremely susceptible to being unplugged, basically. Like in other words, like if you want to build a society where everyone lives forever, right, which is what transhumanists believe, is that we're going to be able to extend life indefinitely, then we're all going to need to be hooked up to some sort of like baby-proofed, environment, because the only way that you could die in that case is to stick a fork in a socket, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're all going to be perpetually waited on by these sophisticated machines because we're otherwise helpless. I don't know if I'm really explaining this well, but
So just to make sure I'm
I don't think
following,
that baby is a good future for us.
I think you just ruined 2001 for me.
so like just to make sure I'm following, what you're trying to say, Matt, is that you hate babies.
I don't want to be a baby. In other words, if you okay,
No, I follow you. I follow
if you
you.
become immortal, right? If you
Uh-huh.
get what transhumanists wants, which is where you eliminate age,
Mhm.
that means we are forever babies because there's no more arc to your life anymore. You never reach maturity. You're always a baby, and you will need to be kept protected from all of the things that could potentially end your life. So we would, like floating through space. This is like the ultimate image of precarity for me. You're a baby in the void of space. Dave Bowman is
I
not.
feel like you're just describing most American suburbs.
Yes. Or like when quarantine started in March and April, I was not watching Contagion and 28 Days Later. I was drawn to movies like Dark Star and Eloamea. I was watching movies about people in space because that was much more relatable, right? This idea that outside is deadly and you're alone in your like capsule, and the only way you communicate is through these like devices that show you like someone on a video conference. Like this is astronaut movies, right? So to me, like if people think that that's an optimistic ending, they're forgetting that it's terrifying to be floating around in space, especially as a baby.
Yeah, you just ruined 2001 for me. I can never watch it again.
I can't say for sure.
Disturbing,
I have
sad,
never floated in
scary
space as
movie.
a baby.
What was that?
I have never floated in space as an adult or as a baby, so
No.
I'm gonna have to step out of any
No, we're
straightforward
the
analysis
point,
of the situation.
Matt, to Matt's point, that's what we're all doing right now. Except for the anti-vaxxers / anti-maskers. All right, Matt, I'm going to go watch 2001: A Space Odyssey with
Man, transhumanism. I haven't thought about that in forever. Yeah, transhumanism. I just always, because they used to give him a few articles in Wired magazine every few months as like entertainment. It would always be like, oh, we're gonna put LED blinkers in our fingers, and like, why? Like,
I don't want that. I want, like you said, life has an arc to it. It has a death. There's a death.
I want like an arm cannon.
Wait. I just want to say that, life has an arc to it. There's death at the end. Death is a natural thing. I don't want to say death is a natural part of life, blah, blah, blah. Life ends. There's no need to extend it for eternity.
See, you're apparently not aware of the transhumanist children's book called Death is Wrong.
Yeah, Jesus.
Which I happen to own a copy of if you've ever like to borrow it. It's all about this idea that people that say that you can't live forever are bigots. And it has all this evidence that we can live forever. And it's a children's book, which is appropriate because to think like this is to want to be a child forever. Although I think actually transhumanists want to be like 25 forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like whatever they perceive as their sexual prime with all of their teeth or whatever. Although if you're living in virtual reality, you can make whatever body you want, right?
I want to be 25 till I die, but then I'll die at 25.
Yeah.
I want to write a response children's book called "You're Born, You Sag, You Die."
I'm sorry, Dan.
That or I could just call it like what? Do you ever see that children's book, The Holes in Your Nose?
No.
It's like so fucked. I must have been the only person who had it. It was like, I'm trying to think of it. It's just like really flat colors. Everything's in like circles and squares. It looks like it was made out of construction paper. And it's just all the different holes in your body for like 15 pages with giant pictures up to it, including it. It's just like a children's book. It's like, hey, don't be worried. Like nothing's missing. It's all the holes are all supposed to be there, which I guess is like. I mean, I guess it wasn't that upsetting as a kid. Like I remember it, but I don't remember it as like a traumatic realization.
I never remembered worrying about the holes in my face.
Yeah, they belong there. That's where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be holes. I don't know if you noticed that my Tati smile is gone.
Sorry.
You've taken it away. No, and I
That
did
was
just
in
go.
Ron's face.
I just went through all of 2001: A Space Odyssey in my head.
But now I'm being annoying because my critique of it is really a critique of transhumanists. So as
Okay.
far as I'm concerned, 2001 can be interpreted however you like,
Yeah.
and I know Arthur C. Clarke's actual meaning for it is something, and I know that the version that gets overwritten by 2010, the year we made
Oh,
contact,
yeah.
has yet another reading. So
Yeah.
all I'm saying is, knowing Kubrick, it probably wasn't an optimistic reading, and that I don't like that so many transhumanists borrow stuff from science fiction without noticing that most of the science fiction is cautionary. Most of it is not this like positivist stuff about how technology is going to improve our lives.
But
Like
I think
that's a
that's
movie where
it's part of a larger movement where I think like reading of cultural objects is being divorced from creative intent in terms of like how the layperson reads things. Like the classic example for me would be, you know, the entire hip hop world not realizing that the Brian De Palma Scarface is a satire. Right? Or like, but at the same time, it's like, is it that they don't realize it, or is it that just this reading is much more? It's more useful to misread the things, right? Like the Harold Bloom, the anxiety of influence kind of thing. Like,
I don't know if they're misreading it. They're appreciating it on at least one level in which De Palma intended it, which was as this sort of virtuoso and like, you know, like guilty pleasure kind of, you know, character, you know. So I don't know, like it's hard to say, right? Because he could have made it less fun.
This is true.
You know, but he made it fun. So it becomes a kind of fantasy character, you know, like to use a more available example that a lot of non-hip hop people like when we say like I'll give him an offer he can't refuse or whatever, you know, like, you know, people say that all the time, like, and they take on the persona of Brando and the Godfather or whatever, like that's because the movie is supposed to.
That like Mad Lib, because like like the Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan movie. I hate that movie, but I find myself just like there's so many lines in that where you can switch out one or two words, and you've got like a pretty lazy but easily comprehensible punchline for when you're hanging out with whatever those things were that I used to get coffee with before all this went down. People, right?
Sorry, I didn't realize what you were getting at. So.
Yeah, I
was over my head.
I actually forgot the word for a few seconds there. So, how many months has it been? I just moved out, so I lost the wall I was scratching the days into.
My calendar says 201 days that I've been distancing.
Oh.
Man, that's like.
So speaking of playtime.
Speaking of play, well, you know, sorry, I went on a little high horse there about transhumanism, right?
I was asking for it.
That's where I draw the line. Like, I don't want cyborg people. Even if it works, like the best case and worst case scenarios with the transhumanists both displease me.
The best case and the worst case.
So, like, let's say they get to live forever. They get their, like, cyborg machine gun arms or whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know, they can just like dump Soylent into a tank instead of in their mouth, whatever it is they want to do. I don't want to live around those people. The other side of it is just like it's actually fucking stupid, and it's just like the equivalent is or literally somebody's sawing off their arm to put electronics on it.
Yeah.
That's also kind of sad and tragic. So there's like no.
Oh, that's at least cool.
Wait, do you ever see that website with the interview with the guy with body identity integrity disorder that sawed off his, I think it was his leg?
No.
It's like a disease, or it's like a mental condition where you
one of these,
yeah, like you think that you're not supposed to have one of your limbs.
Yeah, but the research on that says that actually the people are more well adjusted after they go through with the surgery. So it's you like, and you could whatever the motivations.
I'm just not in that position.
There was a video today, a Reuters story about this. I don't know if you saw. I tweeted this, Ron, but there's this French guy who's covered like every part of his body in tattoos. And now he's I don't know if he's tattooed it, but he's blackened the whites of his eyes.
Yeah.
And he was complaining that he got fired from his job as a kindergarten teacher. And I thought it was the most absurd news story I'd seen in a while, because I was like, okay, of course you did. Like,
You're gonna fight this?
can you imagine? Like,
Seriously complaining about this? Were you surprised in any way?
man, just,
Is this really the profession for you?
I mean, you're not supposed to show him the Illustrated Man until high school, at least.
Well, it's beyond tattooing. I mean, when you like blot out the whites of your eyes, it's just like he has these black voids. It's a very
point where you get so many tattoos you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery again.
It goes all the way around.
You can go on that.
Well, that's a valid reason to cut off one of your limbs then, if it's tattooed and you want to get into.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
You want to get into a good cemetery.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like a matter of like balancing out the need to get a lot of tattoos with the need to self-amputate. It's about finding a happy medium.
So speaking of playtime, Matt, you were starting to say something about you're apologizing for going on the transhumanist rant, but you were about to say something about it.
No, but it wasn't about playtime. I was
okay.
I was still on this because, for a while I was really interested in the theme of infantilization. This was part of my PhD research.
Uh-huh.
The theme of infantilization in science fiction movies, which is why I have this incredibly convoluted reading of 2001.
Oh.
And it's about the idea that transhumanists have this, have a childish understanding of the world, basically, and have a nostalgia to return to childhood. And to me, here's a new interpretation. To me, the most honest narrative of this is Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've seen the movie in a while, but I saw it about 5 years ago. And first of all, I think it's probably Spielberg's best movie. It's definitely his most honest movie.
Better than 1942.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But just to very briefly sketch what happens in this movie, Richard Dreyfuss is a father, like a husband and father, and yeah, he sees a UFO or whatever, and then he becomes obsessed with UFOs, and he has what we would describe, if we took out the supernatural fantastic elements, some kind of nervous breakdown, right?
Right.
He starts playing with Play-Doh in his living room, basically.
Yeah, like mashed potatoes at the table. He has what we might call a manic episode, and he becomes like frighteningly kind of dissociated and borderline abusive towards his kids. And then he becomes obsessed because, of the, I don't think it's communicated yet in the movie, but there's a UFO that's going to be landing, in the desert, and he leaves his family.
Yep.
He abandons his family, and then he gets on the ship and leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So Spielberg said that if he were to make, this was an interview a few years ago, or I don't know, if he made the film now, Richard Dreyfuss wouldn't go on the ship. He'd go back home to his family. That's
why I'm saying it's the most honest movie, because this is about a man actually fleeing his responsibilities to pursue this kind of childish idea. And part of that is that there's a time dilation on the spaceship. So he'll live much longer, right? Because all the people that come off the spaceship the first time should have been dead, right? But they've been living in an alternate timeline. So to me, this really clicks some things in place about the fantasy of transhumanism, that it's not just about returning to some sort of childhood without responsibilities. No, I mean, it's not just about returning to childhood and exploring the wonder of space, whatever. It's also about fleeing anything like adult responsibility, right? So I sort of see these movies as sort of twin ways of looking at the transhumanist fantasy. And they both have to do with the sort of desire to become a child, right? On some fundamental level.
I think that's a huge undercurrent in a lot of major U.S. pop culture, right? That American Beauty is a movie about a guy wanting to become a teenager again.
Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of the appeal of Pee Wee Herman is that he doesn't have to go through any such transformation in order to exist on that plane as a perpetual child.
Yeah. And also with Pee Wee Herman, he's, at least in the first movie, he's pre-sexual. He's not interested in girls. And that sort of resolves the anxieties we have about him being very queer, right? It's well, he's not interested in sex. Yeah. And that's also in Spielberg's cinema, you have almost no sex, right? It's he's notable for having and it was a shock for me to watch E.T. recently, because there's a little bit in that movie.
Right. I mean, his movies are clean to the point where it's kind of racy when Jaws puts something in his mouth.
Yeah.
Wait. Do you know which movie there is a sex scene and it actually had trouble? Like, say in Egypt, they wouldn't show it in Egypt. They wanted to cut it. There's a sex scene in Schindler's List.
Oh yeah.
That's the movie he puts a sex scene in.
Also in Munich, he has a pretty shocking scene, like where a naked woman is killed. So yeah, but I think like this is part of the point is like Spielberg has this very pre-sexual, childlike in his best work, his purest work is this sort of like very childlike kind of cinema, right? And
that's a huge thing with most of the kind of U.S. Like, I don't want to call it the end. Like, everybody seems to place the beginning of U.S. independent cinema at 1970 or whatever, which is like a bunch of bullshit. But like the Martin Scorsese, Spielberg, De Palma,
New Hollywood.
The New Hollywood, yeah, and what the fuck's his name? The Last Picture Show, Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
All obsessed with returning to this point in childhood where they remember being at the movies. Like that's what Star Wars is, right? Star Wars is sort of rehashing of
Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, yeah.
Right, they're all like these dishonest versions of the 400 blows on a certain level.
Yeah. I mean,
the Last Picture Show is pretty bleak, but like the rest of it is.
But it's their childhood combined with like international art cinema influences. So like even with Star Wars, it's Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, but it's also Kurosawa, you know.
Yeah.
So it's it's a little bit of both. Yeah. So like it's that like I call that infantilization or like some
like
sort of
Apatow movies are all about that.
Yeah, they're all about man children. Yeah, like men that don't want to grow up, and usually it's the women who are the mature characters, which many people have pointed out is a complete reversal of the 40s formula for screwball comedy. Like if you go back to like the Preston Sturges movies or Howard Hawks movies, it's like the women are usually the anarchic, childlike presence or whatever, and it's the men who are sort of boring and stiff, right?
Right.
And Apatow reverses this. The women get to have no fun, and it's the men who have all the fun.
All right. And
we've gone everywhere now.
What was that?
Been a
We've
chance
gone everywhere.
to Jason Segel at a scenic island location.
Did you say Steven Seagal?
No, Jason Segel.
Oh, right. Oh, that's the third person. Okay. Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd, and Jason Segal.
Yeah.
Right, they're all going after Barbara. We never leave the front of the building, and there's a lot of like riffs.
Jonah Hill's not in it?
He's in the background somewhere.
Yeah. He makes like a cameo.
He's working in the restaurant when they go and somebody schedules 2 dates at the same restaurant at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And then Jonah Hill's the waiter.
You
like
see
the
a little more of,
sitcom setup.
You see a little more of him in the sequel because there's always a sequel.
He gets his own spin-off movie it's just like a reboot of Jerry Lewis's The Bellboy, but they reuse all the sets.
I see. Playtime 2 starring Jonah Hill.
Playtime 2. No, that doesn't work. Player Time. What if they just did
we can't make Electric
but they
Boogaloo
did like
jokes
the Alien thing, like with the Alien sequels where it's Playtime, but then it's like squared instead of 2.
Yeah, that could work.
All right.
Like,
or it could be like Playtime 2 the next day.
There could be like a crossover between the Playtime franchise and the Cube franchise. They could have like Cube 0 - 1.
That would fit the architecture theme really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is another movie about people like stuck in a bunch of rectangles.
Yeah.
They just they cheaped out on the set a lot more.
But it would be great, like
the same cube the entire movie.
It would be great to redo Playtime with a body count though, like to have like blades coming out of the walls and just to add a little bit more excitement to it.
Like Playtime meets that like Monty Python sketch where they're having the party picnic, whatever, in the backyard, and the tennis ball goes out and like everybody's limbs start falling off and like blood spurting everywhere.
Yeah.
I would pay to watch that, yeah.
Or like, like Star Wars trash compactor Playtime.
Also, I don't know. In this one, in the restaurant scene when everything falls apart, but everybody's fine. In Playtime 2, like people die.
This time it's personal.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the tagline. I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
there's
actually,
only like 80 characters instead of 100 something.
there's another Gilliam Brazil reference there, maybe, because not only does he do the office cubicle thing, but he also does the restaurant blowing up in Brazil, and the waiters are still waiting on the tables. So it is a little bit similar, you know.
I'd say if you combine the food in the drugstore, which looks very similar to the meals in their restaurant in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also a case of someone with a comedy background, with a slapstick background,
Right.
saying, like, I'm going to make a big social satire. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and that's another movie where the sets are like a massive part of the movie. Like without the network, it's not the same movie.
Ron, have you done that episode yet?
What?
Brazil, because I feel like this would unlock so much if you did like a Brazil Lawrence of Arabia episode. Like it would be 7 hours long, probably.
It would be, and Brazil used to be one of my favorite. Brazil used to be my favorite movie.
I know.
I was a teenager and through my 20s, and I don't think I feel that way anymore. I saw it a few more times.
Your favorite movie now is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right? Best movie of the 80s.
Yeah,
that's a great movie.
It really is. We watched that for the show. I wasn't expecting it to be nearly as good as it was, but I was good. I can't think of a funnier movie from the 80s.
Yeah. No, one of my favorite movies now is Bachelorettes, the one with Kirsten Dunst snorting cocaine off a glass table and then having sex in the men's room bathroom.
Wait,
what more could you want in a movie?
Is that Bachelorette Party, or am I thinking of a different movie?
Different movie.
Okay.
It's got I forget who else. Oh, how do you pronounce it? Isla Fisher? She's in it too.
Ms. Fisher.
Ms. Fisher.
Ms. Fisher. Ms. Dunst, Ms. Fisher.
Mrs. Borat, Ms. Fisher.
Yeah, very different movie from
Fisher Queen.
Okay, there's the Terry Gilliam connection.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know, Dan. Should we do an episode on Brazil?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we can do. I mean, there's so many movies.
Yeah, I don't know, Matt.
I've been thinking. I mean, the movie I've been thinking I want to rewatch this whole week is this Maurice Pilot movie that has one of my. For some reason, I'm like fixated on movies where I really like the titles for the last week. Maybe because I've just been in a car for 6 hours at a time. But like the two movies I really want to watch are We Will Not Grow Old Together by Maurice Pilot, which I have not seen in a really long time, and We Spin Around the Night and Are Consumed by Fire, which is like all-time favorite movie title like ever.
Yeah, it's a great title. But Matt, okay, next time you're on, we'll do Brazil.
I thought we were doing Crispin Glover. What happened?
Oh, that's right.
I don't need to see Brazil anytime soon. I think you find another victim for that.
Well, no. So I remember when it was my favorite. Wait. Let me finish. It was my favorite movie. I watched it so many times and all that, and then I was talking to you about it, and you told me how it wasn't a good movie, and I was pissed.
I told you that?
You told me that.
Why did I tell you that? It's a great movie.
Well, you tell me why it wasn't as great. Well, to me, it sounded like you're telling me it's a bad movie. You were telling me about how it wasn't as great and phenomenal that I thought it was.
I was just being a dick. I mean, it was obviously a good movie.
Oh, are you serious?
I don't even remember this conversation.
Wow. Well, see, I remember it because
either you're gaslighting me now or I was gaslighting you then.
Oh, okay. Well, no, you remember why? Well, I won't say it.
What did I say?
I don't
remember.
Why did
I say it was bad?
I don't remember. Did
I say the studio cut was better?
Well, it's shorter, so you have more time to like do stuff with your day.
Okay, this is gonna sound horrible for somebody who loved the movie so much. When I did see the studio cut, and it was what do they call it? The happy ending one. There's
the Love Conquers All edit.
I didn't think it was that bad. I actually enjoyed having a happy ending for that movie for once.
Yeah.
You know, obviously the ending is bleak, and I loved the bleak ending. But I enjoyed having a happy ending at once. Now
I never told you the movie was bad.
Really? Okay, maybe
it was your favorite movie. Then anything I could have said critical would have destroyed you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It would have been like if you said, "I like Playtime except for the second half." Like that would be the same kind of like. It would have the same effect on me as an 18-year-old, probably. Like, oh my god.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. That's probably what it was. All right.
That's probably.
I see like the happy ending cut of Brazil where they finally put sheetrock in the ceiling so you don't see all the ducks.
That would be an improvement.
It would be like.
All
none of it would have happened if they had PDFs, right? Like it's all because a bug goes on a typewriter and creates a typo, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
if everything was computerized or whatever, it would be fine. You wouldn't have any of that.
They've also got like the lamest computers in any movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was computers with 1930s typewriter keyboards.
Well, it's just the guts of an early television, because like really early televisions, the largest you could get the screen was like, I think maybe 10 inches, and you could only do that by putting a giant magnifying glass in front of a much smaller tube that was in the back. That's why all those things are like the size of a cabinet. But you take the guts out of those things and it's just the tube and the magnifying glass. That's what I'm pretty sure, at least that's what they were modeling it on, the stuff that's on all the desks.
You guys, that's going to be a great episode. This is like a little preview of what this episode's going to be like.
Well, now that we've gone over, it's been, I think, about 2.5 hours. So
yeah, I got to go to bed.
Yeah, we're about the length of the original cut of Playtime, so I think this is probably about a good time to. Now that we've started the Brazil episode, it's probably a good time to end.
Hopefully, you've been using this as the commentary track, so you've queued it up and you've been watching Playtime the entire time.
Yeah, which is fine, because in Playtime you don't actually have to hear any of the dialogue.
Well, I was actually gonna say to like John and Mimi, like if they ever do a Blu-ray release of Perfect Lives, like that whole video would be the perfect DVD bonus thing.
All right, so Dan, any last thoughts on Playtime?
I'm gonna have to watch it again. Maybe we'll do another episode on this in like 3-4 years.
Okay.
This time it's personal.
This time it's we can have like we can do like boxing match advertising.
All right, Matt, what about you? Any last thoughts on Playtime?
Watch Playtime.
That's a great
watch Playtime. And Ron, let's watch Traffic.
All right, that sounds good. We'll fill all these ways in which we're pushing off our Betty Davis marathon.
Yeah.
So, all right, yeah, definitely. I want to watch more.
She can't make any more, so we can still catch up.
They haven't done the hologram thing yet.
Oh God, no.
All right.
All right.
Well, shall we sign off?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, everyone, this has been Ron.
This has been Dan.
And this was Matt.
And this has been Anomaly Questionable Movies. Thank you, Matt, for coming on, and we look forward to you coming on again sometime.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, take care, everyone.